Hi, welcome to Ketobiography. I'm your host, Robin Dobbins. Today's guest grew up watching early onset Alzheimer's tear through his family. Then he chose a different path, using metabolic therapies, low carb nutrition, and a sheer determination to challenge what doctors called inevitable. From the CrossFit floor to a growing online community hungry for hope, he's turning a genetic prognosis into a mission to change the story on brain health and Alzheimer's. Please welcome Eddie Rodriguez to Keto Biography. Hello, Eddie. Welcome. So glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, it's been a long time coming, I think, especially since you so graciously hosted me on your podcast. And now we're going to start working together, which we'll get into later. But first, what I love doing here, and it's kind of my whole purpose, is to just allow you to share your story in your own words, in your own way, without me interrupting you. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Tell us all about yourself, your family, and what's going on in your world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share the story. And yeah, we'll get into how we're working together going forward a little bit later. But yeah, so, I started down this journey of metabolic therapies, ketogenic therapies, when my dad was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's back in 2018. Um, he was only 53 years old, and at the time, and the primary income and health insurance provider for my mother and 15-year-old brother at the time. With him becoming disabled, I had to step up and not only help us all rally around him and help to caregive for him, but also figure out how we were going to move together. There's a lot of logistics um, and moving pieces, and we didn't really know how we um, put the steps together one in front of the other, because we didn't live with each other at the time, and that's something that we had to figure out. And there was insurance, and so that whole process was challenging. But what I can say is that we figured it out. His initial prognosis by his first neurologist was very poor. We were told his cognitive decline was progressing very quickly, and that there were no real options except for us to get our affairs in order and just wait it out. Thankfully, we banded together around him. We rallied around him, and we started searching for anything and everything that could help. This is how we found metabolic therapies. So luckily, at the time, we found the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen and the Bredesen Protocol. We found the ketogenic diet. We found the work of Dr. Mary Newport and the power of ketones. And, that was a learning process. And with the Bredesen Protocol, which is really a godsend, it really is a collection, a variety of metabolic therapies as core modalities of the treatment, among some other things. But, at the core of that, it's diet, which is ketogenic. It's producing ketones with exercise. It's stress management. It's sleep optimization. And then some of the things like optimizing hormones. If there's toxins, testing for these things, and detoxifying, whether it be heavy metals or organic environmental toxins, or if there's any, untreated, unidentified infections, identifying those. And what was powerful about that process is that, standard of care at the time, there was really nothing there for us. There was just medication, which we decided not to move forward with. But there wasn't really any testing. With the Bredesen Protocol, not only was there hope, and there was evidence-based success, because there had been studies going back to 2014. I found Dr. Bredesen's first study in 2014. He had 10 participants. It was a case study, a case series. And out of the 10 participants, nine reversed their cognitive decline. And these were people who had already been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. So, I mean, I'm finding this in 2018, and I'm thinking to myself, this was 2014, and there was another study in 2016, and it's published. And then in 2018, another study came out with Bredesen's team, and it was 100 participants. And I'm thinking to myself, this is amazing, but I'm also thinking, why is this not getting any airtime? And what struck me the most was that there was this approach of identifying root cause triggers. And there was a respect, an honor, an appreciation for the label. And that label, you know, what I see is the linguistic representation, the label of Alzheimer's disease, is just a representation of a collection of symptoms that are downstream from root cause triggers. So it was a complete difference of paradigm. It was, and this kind of led me down functional medicine. We've worked with a lot of functional medicine doctors for my dad. And the contrast between standard of care and what we were doing was getting clearer and clearer. And it's been a process of identifying root cause triggers and treating those. You know, respecting the label, but saying we're gonna get to work on what we can control and influence. And it's been amazing that you know, all these years, when we stack up standard of care's approach against what we've been doing with this other team of doctors that we've been working with my dad, and standard of care still, you know, will test only for 3 labs, if that. We'll continue to ask if we want medication. They're amazed by the progress my dad's made, but the amazement never really translates over to inquiry. And that's fine. But what I'll tell you is, within the first year and a half of starting that, the Bredesen Protocol, my dad's cognitive scores on the what's called a Montreal Cognitive Assessment, the MoCA, jumped up by about 37%, which they said could never happen, and that was amazing. And we said, well, you know, there's something here. You know, we're working all of these areas of the protocol, doing these metabolic therapies, doing the ketogenic diet. It was a pretty amazing thing to see. Now, COVID came in 2020, and early in 2020, you know, that really derailed us. It hit my dad significantly hard. You know, we ran into some challenges we had not run into because of COVID, and triggered some seizures, and then it also went into a dementia psychosis, which was very strange. And now we come into a part of the story where we had no idea what was going on. This dementia psychosis came out of nowhere, and he had been sectioned and stabilized with antipsychotic medication. But long story short, the only way we were able to get him out of that psych ward was bringing these books, you know, bringing these studies, showing them metabolic therapies, showing them that what we were working on before what had happened. And they felt enough trust to say, okay, well, you know, they are working on something, and you know, we may not fully understand it, but it looks like they may have enough effort and determination and know-how to at least support him outside of this place. And they released him to us. And if it wasn't for these metabolic therapies, if it wasn't for the ketogenic diet, if it wasn't for these approaches like fasting, I don't think we would have been able to get my dad's cognitive health in such a place where we would have been able to get out of that, because within about a year and a half after that, he lost his dementia psychosis diagnosis. And that's something, again, that they said it was never going to happen, right? he came off all of his antipsychotic medication. And Robin, you know how hard that is. This is a person who's been diagnosed with dementia already. And he came off his antipsychotic medication. So there's something going on biochemically in the brain in such a positive way when we can supply our brain with ketones, when we can supply our brain with raw nutrients, and we can take away the things that are causing the inflammation and causing, whatever inhospitable environment that the brain can't operate effectively in. So, my dad's still going. We're dealing with, one of the things about the protocol is it's testing and identifying what are the contributors. Some of these contributors have been mold toxins, have been organic, or organic environmental toxins from my dad's occupation. He had been a brick and block mason for 37 years in construction, and then mercury. Mercury toxicity, which is something that we've had to slowly detoxify over time. But if it weren't for the foundation, which is, exercise is important, stress management is important, sleep optimization is important, but what we eat, what we're putting in our mouth every day, multiple times a day, that's really the most important piece to this foundation. Because if we can't dial that in, nothing else works. And he wouldn't be able to do all these things. So, he's had his challenges, but he's still going. He's still punching away. And we're grateful for every day that we can do this protocol with him. In this process, to get his buy-in at the outset of this, he was pretty down on himself before we got on the protocol. He had been struggling at work for a couple of years. He'd been struggling with depression because of that. He was hiding symptoms, withdrawing from people. And his sister had passed away the year prior at the age of 57 from early onset Alzheimer's. So to get his buy-in, at the beginning said, look, there's no guarantees, but we can try something, and you won't do it alone. At the very minimum, I'll do it with you. So I'll try all these things. We'll do it alongside you, and we'll just learn as we go, and we'll apply it, and we'll kind of reinforce each other. And that's what we did. So started with me and him. Then my mom jumped on board. My brother jumped on board. My wife jumped on board. Eventually, we all got under one roof. So now we have a 3-generational home. With my kids running around now too. But we're all practicing the protocol, practicing these metabolic therapies, and it's really changed and transformed all of our health trajectories. We've had to learn and unlearn a lot of other stuff. But I can tell you that if it weren't for having to start this challenging and painful process before 2020, the way we were going, I think we would have been hit even harder by COVID, all of us, because we all clearly had some metabolic dysfunction, but we were just tolerating it. So I think there's a lot of that out there, tolerating it and tolerating the standard American diet and tolerating a lower level of function. But part of what I do and why I do it now is to help others also learn about these metabolic therapies, learn about dietary shifts, for the prevention of chronic disease, and also just for a higher enjoyment of life. Our world has gotten smaller, all of us, because of this process of having to be there for my dad, and it's been a training ground. And I don't want to see other people necessarily go through the same thing. I'd really like to see people in a much healthier place in general, because chronic disease is everywhere. And it's, I see it in my family. I see it in my friends. You see it everywhere. And it's something that I'd really like to see us thrive from a health and fitness standpoint. So before I wrap this up, I'll share two more things in terms of the story here. One thing that we learned in this process was in my family's family history of early onset Alzheimer's, we, a lot of people have heard of the gene, what they call a polymorphism, a mutation, ApoE4, apolipoprotein 4. And ApoE4 has gotten a lot of airtime lately. You could have one copy or you could have two copies. And it's typically associated with a higher incidence of the development of Alzheimer's, especially late onset Alzheimer's. And if you have two copies of 4, there's a very high correlation of developing Alzheimer's at some point. So we found out as part of the testing process, yeah, we do have 4s. I have one copy of the 4. My dad has a copy of the 4. But we also found out that we had another gene, which they call deterministic, that it gets diagnosed as familial early onset Alzheimer's disease. And what that means is that according to scientific research up to this point and medical practice up to this point, the standard of care sees it as deterministic in that if you have the gene, no matter what you do, you're going to develop early onset Alzheimer's, and that the gene is causal. That's the perception that they take. So the gene is causal, and that you'll develop it. I find out my dad has the gene, and then I come to find out that I have the gene. So in this process, and there's about a 50% chance that you pass it along. So now, as I'm doing this alongside my dad, this is something that I'm working through mentally. That prognosis of, typically the way that works is, statistically speaking, and I'm 35 now, but statistically speaking, because of this gene, I'm supposed to be demonstrating cognitive impairments, from now, mid to late 30s, and statistically should track for, becoming disabled by cognitive decline between the ages of 48 and 53, around the same ages that other family members that I've had in my family have gone. And I respect that prognosis. I respect those perceptions, but I don't share that. My perspective is that this gene, presenilin-1, is it is a gene whose properties are not yet fully understood. Just like ApoE4 was years ago. ApoE4, you go back 15 years ago, and almost every neurologist and almost every practicing researcher would tell you that ApoE4 was deterministic, especially if you had 4/4. And as more research has been done and more time and energy has been invested into, sussing out all of these different properties of this gene and why evolution would embed this gene in humans, there are things that they've figured out give people a certain advantage with ApoE4, and then there are other things that you come to find out it's our environment, it's our diet that's the mismatch for the gene, right? The standard American diet, inflammatory, high fructose corn syrup and insulin resistance and all sorts of different things that might be part of what is normally seen in the Western world now are highly inflammatory to ApoE4. And now there are ApoE4s everywhere that when you start testing them, they thought, oh, maybe it was just 5% of the population. No, it's 10% of the population. No, it's 25% of the population. If you start testing more people, you start seeing there's more ApoE4s, and there are more ApoE4s that are not developing Alzheimer's at all. And I'm part of a community, a great community online called apoe4.info. Thousands of ApoE4s from all over the world, and many of them are working on prevention. Many of them have also done reversal, the Bredesen Protocol, and many of them are going into advanced ages without Alzheimer's. So it's a testament to genes load the gun. What we do, what we eat, what we breathe, how we think, who we surround ourselves with, our environment loads the gun. And there just hasn't been enough research and really incentive for research for presenilin-1 for familial early onset Alzheimer's. There's only about, on average, 300 families globally that have been identified that have this. So there isn't really much of a profit incentive to put a lot of resources into researching this and see why this is happening. But this is something that I have faith we will have more information on. And for me, I mean, I'm going to work on what I can control and influence. We're determined as a family that with the generations of my father, myself, my brother, my kids, we change our family tree. And it will be mostly due to working on what we can control and what we can influence, which is our metabolic health, and making sure that we are metabolically healthy and that we're supplying our brains with adequate fuels and adequate nutrients, and staying away from environmental toxins that can trigger cognitive decline. So there's that piece. And I guess the last piece of my story I'll talk about is, especially after 2020, after the pandemic started. I'm sure you saw this too, Robin, in your community, because I think this is like, who didn't see this? But, in my community, locally and family, we just saw a lot of decline in health very quickly in a lot of people, especially anybody who already had existing comorbidities, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, insulin resistance. And something that actually started happening as well is people not too far from the age of my father developing what became diagnosed as early onset Alzheimer's. I started getting phone calls and emails, asking me, what is your dad doing? Because there was interest before, but with COVID and things becoming a little bit more acute in different households, people wanted to know, what are you guys doing? What is he eating? What is this? How does this work? And it kept trying to talk through. It's a lot of moving pieces, and you know this, Robin. This is a lot of these things that we've had to learn and unlearn. They're simple, but they're not easy. And a lot of that is because the contrast to that, the standard American diet, when we were taught the food pyramid, all these things, it's hard to kind of reconcile that with this whole other way of eating and living. So, after a while, people say, you gotta. It's like I get on the phone call with you. This, it makes sense, but then like 20 minutes later, it's out. It's hard to kind of practice and put together. People kept saying, you got to put something online. You got to put something online so we can come back to it or something like that. Like, I got a full-time job and, caregiving for my dad, and I got kids now. I'm like, well, what time? But, I decided January 1st, 2024. So, I'm just going to start. So I started a YouTube channel called BrainHeal, and I just started sharing and documenting, sharing what we were learning as a family, caregiving for my dad and helping him manage the Bredesen Protocol, what we were learning from all of these great doctors and researchers who are, on the cutting edge of neurology and metabolic health, and documenting our progress through that. And at first it started as, if I was going to start it, like I told my wife, I said, I'm just going to keep going, right? I'm not going to fizzle out. I mean, if I start this, then I'm just going to keep going. And if it's helpful to people, I'll keep going. So at first it kind of started just getting all this information that all these notes and everything I've been compiling, and, you should see my desk. It's a mess, but, just getting that out there in a digestible format for people so it could be helpful. But then over time, it's been documenting our progress through that. And then with our genes, I'm determined, I have faith, we'll keep taking action every day. But, look, if it doesn't work and, I do have to suffer the same fate or whatever it may be, someone else can pick up the torch in my family, because there's a lot of information that's being compiled and archived now in a public way. So there's a utility in that as well. But to close up, my determination, I want to be there for my kids. I don't want to become disabled, at middle age and be dependent on my wife and my kids. I'm determined to defy that prognosis, as my dad's been defying his prognoses throughout this whole process. And I'm so grateful for him to have agreed to do this, because we've learned so much in the process of him, really being the star athlete on the field, doing all of these things, and us helping manage him and manage the protocol around him. And yeah, it's something that I hope is also helpful to others as people check in with the channel, or listen to some of the interviews, or they might be going through something similar. I can tell you that the community that's kind of grown around that, I've been able to learn from other people on the same path, and that was kind of part of it too. To send out a bat light, because I know there are other people out there, and when you're a caregiver, you're so engrossed on just trying to make the trains run on time every day and just live to fight another day the next day, and your world gets smaller. It's hard to check in with other people, but it's great when you can, because all of a sudden there's other people who are going through similar things, and we can all help flatten the learning curve by sharing what's working for us and what's working for their loved one. So that's been cool. So I guess that's a lot there. Sorry, a little drawn out there, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
No, it's certainly not drawn out or long, and that's exactly what I wanted to hear, was this story. So I'm going to go back, maybe detach from the family story just for a second to get some clarity, because you talk about Bredesen's protocol, but I know I have a lot of people come to me and ask me about it, and I'm not fluent in this protocol. So can you just give us like the rough overview of what that means, like on a day-to-day basis, or maybe how some people can get started with it if they think it's right for them?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing I'll preface this with is that the Bredesen Protocol, they just wrapped up they just wrapped up a clinical trial, randomized clinical trial in September. So the results from that will be coming out, and they did a clinical trial back in 2022 where 84% of the participants reversed their Alzheimer's symptoms. So it's pretty amazing, and it's really the only evidence-based protocol out there that is having these kind of measurable results. And they just did a paper. The original 10-person cohort in 2014 is still seeing sustained improvement in 2024. They released that paper. So cool.
That's amazing.
I think,
And that power of hope. That's where the power of hope
yes,
is, where we can see these things like this. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I just wanted to preface that with that. And I think the oldest participant right now is 85 or 86. So very cool. Now the Bredesen protocol, it basically, the way you get started and maybe we'll link this, but Dr. Bredesen's got a company, Apollo Health, and they need a website you can start. And the way you start is he's got an assessment process called the cognoscopy. And this is where you start. And, everybody knows that you turn 50, you get a colonoscopy to see where you're at with that, right? You want to make sure you're screening for colon cancer. But for the brain, oftentimes, statistically speaking, Alzheimer's or cognitive decline that then becomes diagnosed as Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia gets caught too late. And usually one of the reasons for that is because it is an embarrassing thing for most people. Most people are sensing that they're not quite themselves. They can't keep up in conversation anymore. They don't feel comfortable driving. So they start to withdraw and they start to compensate for a few years. And usually, loved ones will compensate with them out of, sort of a cognitive bias. And I was the same way, My uncle was the one tapping me on the shoulder and saying, you gotta take your dad to the neurologist. But he was doing that 2 years before we finally had an event where we had to, right? So the cognoscopy, what he suggests is that at the age of 45, everyone should get a cognoscopy. What that is it's a battery of tests to see where you're at with your cognitive health. And it's like, that to me is such a simple thing. Because our first neurologist, and it's the same thing. You go to a neurologist right now, they only test B12, TSH, and basic metabolic panel. And
that's just sad. That's really.
It. Yeah. That's it. And then before you're done testing, before the last breath comes out, it's like, okay, what medication are we going to get you on? And look, I'm grateful for all the positive benefits that some of those medications have had for some people. It delays some of the decline, but there's nothing that is a cure. There's nothing. And then what you come to find out is because Bredesen has done so much testing, has compiled so much data, you find out that there's not one trigger for Alzheimer's, that there's multiple contributors that create a metabolic dysfunction in the brain that then presents as memory loss and executive function deficits and then motor function deficits and all of these things. So it's about identifying what are all those contributing factors, and it's different for everybody. So, but the key thing, right, because some people have mold toxins, some people have Lyme disease that's undiagnosed. Chris Christopherson, who was an actor and a famous musician, a lot of people don't know he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and had lived with the label for 4 years, and then they decided to test him for Lyme disease, and in 2016. They found that he had, is it Bartonella or Babesia, one of those two that causes Lyme disease. And they treated for that. The cognitive decline went away and he lost his diagnosis. It's amazing that doesn't get enough airtime.
No, I mean, this is a very, very famous person that has an incredible story that could help so many people.
Exactly.
It didn't involve Alzheimer's expensive medication, so we're not going to talk about it.
Right, exactly. But what's amazing about that is think of how many people are walking around with cognitive decline that gets labeled Alzheimer's, that's being triggered by something that could be identified and treated, right? And then the criticism to that I've heard is, well, he didn't have Alzheimer's. Well, what does it matter? Alzheimer's is just it's a nameplate. What matters is the cognitive decline that has disabled that person and made that person a burden on their family. So get to the root cause of that, treat it, liberate the person, forget the label, right? But this is what we found is that the Alzheimer's label is just, it's really not worth much, because you come to find out that and they tell you that not two Alzheimer's are the same, or not one, they're all different. It's because it's different root cause triggers, and so some people have some sort of unidentified chronic infection. Other people have mold toxins from their home. Other people have heavy metals. Usually the top ones are mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead. Some people have a lot of women. Women are almost 3/4 the number of patients of Alzheimer's. So so women are about 70% of all Alzheimer's patients out there. Look at this. The majority of them statistically start developing cognitive decline in perimenopause and menopause, where hormones start to dysregulate. One of the key drivers that Dr. Bredesen's team has found for the such pronounced dysregulation of those hormones is insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction, right? But some people with bioidentical hormone replacement therapy or better nutrition to support the hormones, their cognition gets better. But the foundation for everything is insulin sensitivity. And, Dr. Matthew Phillips and Dr. Stephen Cunane, and the work of others, on the Mizuki group and Metabolic Mind, they found the same thing. The brain has to be able to create ketones, and the brain cannot be insulin resistant. And that's really the foundation. So the cognoscopy tests for all of these things, testing for possible infections, heavy metals, all these. But the top tests are fasting glucose, fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, right? Cholesterol is important, but not as important as those markers for insulin resistance. So the more insulin sensitive a person can be, the better their cognition. The more insulin resistant they are, the worse their cognition. And as they get older, and now they might have some mold toxin, now they might have a little bit of arsenic that's creeping up or whatever. As they get older, that insulin resistance is getting worse, and now they're developing cognitive decline. So it's identifying these things. Once you have a cognoscopy, he calls it the 36 holes in the roof. You can't plug one hole in the roof, which a drug tries to do, and think that you're going to cure a disease that has multiple targets. And drugs are typically designed to have one target, one enzyme, right? So he calls you cannot defeat dementia with a silver bullet. You need a silver buckshot. You got to patch up the 36 holes in the roof. And usually what they found is if you can patch up like 10 to 15 of them, the decline stops and you start seeing improvement. And they've seen this with white matter and gray matter growth back on MRIs, things that they say you could not do, but they have it. So it's identifying which lab markers are out of range, and now a personalized protocol gets built around the person. And usually everybody has to work on their insulin sensitivity, right? So people might be on a detoxification thing over here or bioidentical hormone replacement, but everybody has to adhere to 4 major things: the ketogenic diet, or trying to get towards ketogenic, an exercise regimen that's supportive of that person, meeting that person where they're at. The exercise regimen of a 59-year-old is going to be different than an 85-year-old. Stress management, through meditation, yoga, whatever works for that person, heart math, heart and brain coherence, and sleep optimization. And there's a surprising amount of people on the protocol that have sleep apnea that they didn't know about, and it's been causing cognitive decline. So, but as having transformed your own health, your sleep, your stress management, and your exercise get a lot better when you start feeding yourself better. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's, excuse me, that's it in a nutshell. It's really working those things on a daily basis, and then some of those other things are around that core.
And we live in this world where we see this all the time. Like, there's no one size fits all answer to any person's kind of health journey or health or just life anyway. It's hard to imagine that we also are fighting people who do think that there's this one pill is going to save everything without really asking those foundational questions of where did this come from and how did it happen, what was the trigger. And so it's very interesting to me to see that this is how your management, your father's management, is working, because you are asking those you know harder questions and trying to address those harder questions. So um, I guess now it's like I'm going to ask this family question. You can go off with it. I would like to know how your dad's doing, but
Yeah.
you also mentioned that all of you are on board, and I don't know if that all goes all the way down to your children and your three generational home, but what benefits or changes or anything like that have other people, including yourself, found by changing this and following this protocol?
Yeah. So when it comes to my dad, he's moving forward. Since 2020, he's had his challenges, especially because we had almost a year and a half where compliance on the protocol was almost impossible, because that was just working on, let's get him off this antipsychotic medication, which was, this, Robin, it's really just tranquilizer. It's like horse tranquilizer. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm not minimizing the positive benefits and the life-saving measures that it can have for a lot of people in a temporary time. Like when they were first prescribed, when we didn't know what was going on and he was violent, it was something that we needed, right? But we got to work on metabolic therapies. We started testing for what could have happened there. COVID created some brain inflammation there. This is how we found out that he had mercury toxicity and he had some gut infections that were creating some aberrant chemistry. So that, it's one of those things. There's a blessing in every challenge or adverse event. But then it was getting him, continuing to march him forward. And I'd say, his baseline is lower than what it was, but he's still somewhat functional in the way that we know he can continue to comply with the protocol, and we can continue to have, string good days one after another. The main thing right now is he has mercury in his system that takes a long time to detoxify, and it's a rather difficult process, because everybody goes at different paces. Some people are strong enough, have the constitution to do chelation therapy. He can't do chelation, so he's got to do something that's a little bit slower. And if we would have been able to do this a lot sooner, it would have been a great benefit. But we had to piecemeal remove mercury silver fillings that were in his mouth, one at a time. And that was something that had to be very, done slowly and safely. We got his last one out successfully, thankfully, in July of 2024. So now it's just been, and what happens is once you get the last one out, usually the body will start, the tissues start releasing the mercury. So you have to kind of catch it. And so, we're working with, I say all of these things, work with great medical practitioners. Don't try to do this stuff on your own. We have a great team around him, which I'm very appreciative for. But that's where we're at, is working on slowly detoxifying that mercury, and continuing to see good progress in him. So that's him. As far as us, like my wife and I, we got a lot healthier. At the time, I didn't think I had to lose weight. I lost like 30 pounds overall, but I lost like 20 pounds in that first year. Started the ketogenic diet. Um, I As far as my kids, they're eating healthier, right? But they're kids, so they're still eating a good amount of more processed food than I'd like to see them eat. But because it's so hard to get away from it for the stuff in school, and I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 5-month old. But so the 5-month-old is keto, obviously, right? Because he's he's on breast milk. But the other two, we before, like we had to go organic a couple of years ago, and we saw a big difference. And the reason we were like really holding off on organic because it's expensive, but we did some glyphosate tests on my dad and my son, and my son was having some sensory processing stuff going on. So we did some glyphosate tests, and they were both of them were off the charts. Said, okay, that's it. We got off the non-organic, and the glyphosate levels came down. The sensory processing stuff went away for my son, and my dad's motor function got better. So, that's a whole other thing. Pesticides and herbicides that are in our food supply, which are much more prevalent in processed foods. But, I think overall we've gotten healthier and we're more health conscious. And as for me, I went ketogenic for about the first year, but I use CrossFit as an exercise program. And really, I'm a big data person, so I use it as a barometer for my metabolic health. There's benchmark workouts where you can measure yourself. So I kind of use that to audit myself, whether I'm getting, closer, whether I'm moving, further into more metabolic fitness, or I'm getting farther away from that. And it's very, some of the workouts are a little bit glycolytic, so you need some glycogen on board. So I'm more low carb now. I try to stay under 100 grams of carbs for the most part. But if I'm not working out that day, I'm trying to fast for longer periods and stay within that 50 to 75 grams. Seeing how much I can push with as little carbs on board as possible, so that I'm creating ketones. Because what we've learned from especially Dr. Stephen Cunnane and Dr. Matthew Phillips, we were meant to have times where we're carb burning, and we were meant to have times where we're running on ketones. And we have so much chronic disease in the US, especially because everybody's only carb burning, and they lost the ability to create ketones because their insulin is sky high. And if your insulin is too high, it's impossible to physiologically create ketones. So you're only relying on one fuel, and then there's the blood sugar swings that ride with that. There's the neuronal dysfunction, Dr. Chris Palmer's brain energy theory. So, yeah, we try to get into, good fasting periods to create some ketones.
I like that you said all of that, because it's honestly it's a big topic in my mind, that we think now that we've found keto, so keto is the only way, or those that have gone carnivore is the only way, and you have to cut all these things out, and you're not doing it right if you're not doing it this way. And that's really not true. There's going to be a right way for each individual, depending on their inputs and their outputs as well, and or their environment, all of that, all of it plays into it. So I like that you will talk honestly and freely about how you're not in this, deep ketosis world where it has to be like this. Like, that flexibility is important, and it's certainly working for you, because you're able to do a lot of things. I don't want to brush over the fact that you created this podcast, Brain Health. But I have something else I want to talk about. So I'm just going to say out loud to everyone, find Eddie on Brain Health. It's on YouTube. I will include a link. All of the stuff that he's given us, I mean, we only have an hour, so you've given us a very broad scope of this conversation. If you want deeper information, he has it on that YouTube channel. Very educational channel, but also tells a lot of the stories. So I'm going to direct everyone there to go find it. And again, I'll put it in the notes. But I want to
Thank
switch topics now, since we don't have too much time left, about your involvement with Metabolic Collective. You're a board member, and as of this recording, we're recording in December, but some things are changing in your role there. So this will come out in January. So I think you can talk a little more freely about what's going to happen. So tell me about how you got involved in Metabolic Collective, what you currently do, and then what you're going to be doing as we move forward with this great grassroots movement.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that. And how I got involved with Metabolic Collective. Look, this is the power of community, right? If I wanted to put the bat light out the way I had with my channel, and you wouldn't have had to put the bat light out with your channel, and some of these other great members of Metabolic Collective, what unites us is that what we like to call, I don't know about experts, right? But we say experts by experience, right? But we've all had this experience of having to respect standard of care's approach, but then not settling for that and seeking out other answers that could help. And we've all had to, in seeking, find, we kind of come to the same watering holes. We find some of the same strategies. We find some of the same people who are being extremely helpful and on the cutting edge, like Dr. Chris Palmer, or Dr. Dale Bredesen, Dr. Matthew Phillips, or Dr. Martin Picard. And Metabolic Mind has been such a great resource as an education hub and a community creator and unifier. So how I got involved is, we're online. It's like, we're living our lives, but we have our online versions of ourselves, and we're bumping into each other, and thankfully that's how we've come together. And I'm so grateful that Metabolic Collective is here and is starting to gear up this grassroots movement, because look, nuts and bolts, Metabolic Collective, what are we? We're an independent 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to accelerate the real-world adoption of metabolic therapies, especially the ketogenic protocols for serious mental illness, neurological disorders, by building a global peer-led grassroots movement. But what does that mean, right? Our ultimate vision is we want to build a community of people like us who have gone through this process and are going through this process of transforming our own health, getting rid of, liberating ourselves of old labels or prognoses and diagnoses that others have said, it's deterministic, or it's something that you can't help. And we really want to see these metabolic therapies as first-line treatments that are offered alongside whatever is already there, right? So we see ourselves as this kind of Alcoholics Anonymous style engine for the metabolic mental health revolution. And we want to continue to scale as a community-driven support and advocacy hub, so that people don't have to figure out metabolic psychiatry and metabolic neurology alone. So, our core beliefs: recovery, often full remission from conditions like bipolar, schizophrenia, major depression, OCD, PTSD, dementia, Parkinson's, is possible for many people using metabolic ketogenic interventions, as seen in recent growing waves of trials, studies, case reports, and series, as well as anecdotal N of ones. And we believe that lived experience is the most powerful accelerant for awareness and adoption. So connection and purpose for us are themselves, the metabolic medicine. Loneliness and isolation is something that a lot of people go through, having some sort of brain disorder or diagnosed disorder. So we're coming together to support each other, to collectively strengthen ourselves and reinforce the progress, and accelerate the pace at which these metabolic therapies are embraced by standard of care. Because on average, it takes 17 years from a groundbreaking study or a groundbreaking, meta-analysis to really say, wow, this approach works, from that point to see it in practice. And we want to help shorten that, because if we only let the clinicians work on this, it's going to take that long. But we know that in a market, there's supply and demand. And if we want supply to change and do that within 5 or 10 years, and we want to see these things offered as first-line treatments to massively reduce the pain and suffering that so many people are going through and not really getting the greatest answers, if you want to do that, we have to work on the demand side, meaning we have to help advocate and create awareness with other people, because there's plenty of demand. It's just that people don't know that this stuff is available. And advocating and creating that awareness, we really want to help people get into their doctor's office and just, even simply plainly inquiring about these therapies and bringing these books. And so the doctors can start to think, maybe I should take that CME course. Maybe I should bring this into my tool belt. Maybe it is working. It worked for Robin. I saw her 2 years ago, and look at her now, or, my dad or me. So, that's Metabolic Collective in a nutshell. I know you talked about plenty about Metabolic Collective, but for me, I'm very passionate about seeing this vision unfurl in a very short order, because I think we have a great opportunity in front of us. We have this great electronic nervous system that connects all of us, called the internet and social media. And I think the future is here already. So many people are being helped by these therapies, by these protocols, but there are far more people that have no idea they exist. And we have to disseminate the information and level the information playing field. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Does it? I don't know. No, I like to just use kind of this analogy, is that metabolic mind has, as you said, it's a hub for the educational resources, for the science. Bazooka Group is funding a lot of different studies that are going on. That's where you can find that. But those of us have gone through this. As I said before we even started recording, we want to get on top of the highest mountain and just start screaming to people. Or, you hear all the time, I try to tell my family member, but they weren't on board. So our Metabolic Collective kind of mindset is to be in that ground level. Like, this is where the people who have lived it are, and try to kind of change the conversation out in the world. So maybe we're not at the scientific study level, but we're creating groups that can help each other. We're creating resources that we can take to doctors' offices. We're creating these things so that we kind of bypass some of that system that 13 years that's in the way, in between the treatment being out there with everyone and the research that's happening. So it's very exciting. And so what's your role with Metabolic Collective?
So at this moment, I'm the vice president of the board, and coming into January, I'll be shifting into the president of the board, which I'm very grateful for, and yeah, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work alongside, shoulder to shoulder with all of you, and we're all working together to build this community and kind of take our own communities that we've built individually and collectively bring them together and amplify that, and expand the reach of this. So I'm very optimistic, and I think that COVID was a time where I think a lot of people woke up to asking questions, and I think to ask better questions opens the door to a different direction. So I think this is a good time, now that there's an appetite for better answers, and there's less skepticism, because there are more people. Like, it's so important, like people like yourself or Hannah Warren, or other people who are on the board, or other people who are great members of Metabolic Collective and amazing volunteers. It's so important for all of us to share our story, because it opens the door for many more people behind us to get interested and start and try. So that's one of the things we want to do. We also want to help support other people, because there's a lot of learning curve, and there's sometimes you can try these things, but you may not get the full support of your current clinician. So being able to lean on a community that has, may have already been through your path is extremely helpful, and that's what we want to be for people.
Yeah, we certainly don't want people to be alone. And, we can receive information, but to be able to connect with someone else that's been through it and have a conversation. And, we're not offering medical advice by any means, but we can each share our individual process, and another person can then pick and choose what's going to be right for them and work with their physician on how that plays out with how they're being treated for whatever it is that they came and talked to us about. But it's important to have that. And I think that's why I started this podcast, definitely, was to just get those stories out there. But I felt like I was on an island by myself. And I don't know if you felt that way when you got started, but to actually have a place where we can kind of come together. Like you said, the watering hole, which is coincidentally the name of our monthly gathering, watering hole. So everyone's invited. You can look on our Facebook page at Metabolic Collective, or on our website, metaboliccollective.org, to find out more about our monthly watering hole meetings, or just join the community and start getting to know actual people with real lived experience who have gone against the grain, to use a really terrible pun, to change their metabolic health, and really open up a whole brand new world of opportunity. We go through our lives sick. We don't realize how much we tolerate. You've mentioned that earlier in your story, how much people just tolerate on a daily basis. And then one day we change it, and we open up and we wake up, and it's like, oh, what do I do with all of this energy? I hope people wake up and want to put it towards something good. So Metabolic Collective is certainly something good to put that energy toward.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Yep.
I'll have to remember that for next time.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, Eddie, it has been great to have you on the show. Where can people find you, connect with you?
Yeah, look, you can find me on Brain Health, on YouTube. You can just it's written a little bit weird. You'll put it up there, and people will link to it. And then you can find me. I'm on some of these socials, Facebook, Instagram, X. But yeah, you can go over to the YouTube, and you might find some helpful stuff on there. And I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. So. And then you said it's a little hard to find. It is. If you just type in brain health, you're not going to find it. It has some underscores and some things. So definitely check the show notes to find the link to that. And do you have an actual community on your YouTube page? Do people chat within there?
So usually my videos will link, and we can link it too. So I've got a Facebook group that's a community there that they're on all the videos linked there, but we'll link it there as well. And that's a good place for anybody who wants to learn about the Bredesen Protocol, or some of the things that are working for a lot of neurological other issues, MS, Parkinson's. There's so many commonalities, and we're learning from people who are also getting success in this as well. So it's really helpful to kind of see what the common denominators or what's working is. So there's that. And the brain health name, I thought I was being clever. It's like BrainHeal in parentheses, but the parentheses kind of screws up the search. But yeah.
Things we learn after the fact. And if you're interested in building your own community of some sort, come to Metabolic Collective, because we have been through this before, and we will help you not create a name that is difficult to find.
There you go.
That's part of my mission, is like, if somebody's going to start something off, they will not hit the same mistakes or walls that I bumped into.
That's it.
Well, it's been lovely having you on. I'm looking forward to working with you as we get into the new year.
Like,
And everyone, please just go check them out on YouTube because there's so much great information there. And you've only been doing this for a year. Your YouTube's only a year old?
I guess I'll be eclipsing 2 full years.
Two. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah, wow. So you've been able to do a lot in a very small amount of time, and it's helping so many people. So very thankful for you, for your work, for your brother who's behind the scenes,
Yes.
ha helping promote it and all of that stuff. So just again, wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us and hearing our keto biography. Bye.
Thank you.